Good afternoon. We'll call this business meeting to order. Today, the committee will consider two bills, S-227, Savanna's Act, and S-982, Not Invisible Act of 2019. Two amendments have been timely filed, one for S-227 and the other for S-982. Last Congress, the committee, along with the full Senate, passed Savanna's Act. On January 25, 2019, Senators Murkowski and Cortez Masto introduced S-227, Savanna's Act. This bill has 23 co-sponsors, including myself and Senators Baldwin, Cantwell, Capito, Coons, Kramer, Daines, Gillibrand, Harris, Heinrich, Klobuchar, McSally, Merkley, Murray, Rosen, Schatz, Sinema, Smith, Sullivan, Tester, Tillis, Udall, and Wyden. On June 19, 2019, a legislative hearing was held on the bill where the administration and two tribal witnesses provided testimony. All three witnesses testified in support of the goals of the bill, but requested further changes to the legislation. S-227 intends to improve the response when addressing missing and murdered Native Americans by improving access to federal criminal databases, requiring training and mandating data collection, and directing the U.S. Attorney General to review, revise, and develop law enforcement and justice guidelines. The bill is named for Savanna LaFontaine Graywind. She was a Spirit Lake pregnant woman from North Dakota who disappeared on August 19, 2017. Her body was found 8 days later north of Fargo, North Dakota in the Red River. While Savanna's tragic death did not go unnoticed, we must remember that many Native people go missing each year, with many of those cases not being solved. Senators Murkowski and Cortez Masto have been working on edits to the bill, and these edits are included in the substitute amendment that the committee will consider today. The amendment, SIL 19C03, filed by Senator Murkowski and Senator Cortez Masto, reflect those changes. The main changes found in the substitute amendment will expand the requirement for the creation of law enforcement guidelines to apply to all U.S. attorneys, not just those with Indian country jurisdiction, add a consultation with tribal organizations and urban Indian organizations, require the U.S. Attorney General to publicly list the law enforcement agencies in compliance with the guidelines, and replace the affirmative preference subsections with an implementation and incentive sections providing grant authority to law enforcement organizations. The other bill on today's docket, the Not Invisible Act, also addresses the crisis of missing, murdered, and trafficked Native Americans. On April 2, 2019, Senators Cortez Masto, Murkowski, and Tester introduced S-982, the Not Invisible Act of 2019. The following senators have been added as co-sponsors: Daines, Moran, Rosen, Smith, and Sullivan. The bill received a legislative hearing on June 9, 2019, when officials from the Department of Justice and Interior and two tribal leaders testified on the bill. The purpose of the Not Invisible Act of 2019 is to combat the crisis in Indian country as it relates to the murdered, trafficking, and disappearance of indigenous women in and around Indian country. The Not Invisible Act of 2019 coordinates prevention efforts between the Secretary of the Interior, outside organizations, and other federal agencies as appropriate. The bill also creates a joint advisory committee on reducing violent crime against Native people within the Department of the Interior. The recommendations made by the Joint Advisory Commission will help to combat violent crimes committed against Indians and on tribal lands by more effectively identifying, reporting, and responding to cases of a missing, trafficked, or murdered Indian woman, child, or man. The amendment, SIL 19C04, in the nature of a substitute amendment, was timely filed by Senators Cortez Masto and Senator Murkowski. And I will turn now to I'll turn to her in a minute to speak regarding her amendment. The changes made to the bill in the substitute amendment requires the coordinator to issue annual reports to Congress, changes the format from being an advisory committee to a commission, ensures diversity of tribal representation on the commission, and adds more members to increase its effectiveness, and concentrates the commission to make recommendations to the Department of Justice and Interior. Before we turn to consideration of the bills, I'm going to turn to Vice Chairman Udall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling today's business meeting to consider S-227, Savanna's Act, and S-982, the Not Invisible Act. I'm proud to sponsor both bills. They put forward concrete solutions to address the barriers to coordination between law enforcement and federal agencies that worsen the missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis. As I mentioned at the legislative hearing on these bills in June, this committee understands that Indian country faces a number of public safety issues. We've heard from tribal leaders, we've heard from law enforcement, and we've heard from family members of Native victims. Moving these two bipartisan bills out of committee today demonstrates our shared commitment to improving tribal public safety and to being responsive to tribes and Native communities. I look forward to getting both bills through the full Senate and signed into law as soon as possible. But our work continues. I also look forward to advancing the other important bipartisan public safety bills currently pending before this committee, especially S-288, the Justice for Native Survivors of Sexual Assault Act, S-290, the Native Youth and Tribal Officer Protection Act, and S-1853, the Badges for Native Communities Act. I have worked closely with Senators Smith, Murkowski, Tester, Cortez Masto, and McSally on these bills. They tackle real issues like jurisdiction and law enforcement staffing shortages that Indian country has urged Congress to address. I'm confident that our tradition of working across the aisle and across Senate committees will allow us to get these additional bills enacted into law. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to extend my thanks to Senators Cortez Masto and Murkowski for their leadership in advancing the Not Invisible Act and Savanna's Act. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Murkowski, I would turn to you for any opening comments on Savanna's Act.
Mr. Chairman and Vice Chairman Udall, thank you for the opportunity to present these bills before the committee, and I appreciate the support that we have had. As you have mentioned, Mr. Chairman, we've seen some process here. We got some feedback from Department of Justice. We got feedback from others. We've sought to incorporate that. I think we're in a really good place with both of these bills. I've had so many conversations with so many about the issue of murdered, missing Indigenous women and trafficked women. Tammy Giroux of the Alaska Native Women's Resource Center, Lynn Hooch of the Yupik Women's Coalition, Joanne Horn of the Amonic Women's Shelter, shared stories that just break your heart. And I know that these are not stories that come uniquely to me. I know far too many of us have heard the issues that women in many communities are facing, the need for resources, the need for law enforcement coordination, the need to respond to these cases. I've talked with Vivian Corthius and Victor Joseph. They have really led the way in Alaska, highlighting that tribal courts and self-governance are critical to providing for our safe communities, and more that we can be doing there. And there's so many that are doing, it's not just the talking, their actions are bringing this very difficult issue to light. There is a woman by the name of Amber Webb who has created a pretty powerful symbol to honor the women that have been impacted. She has sketched the faces of more than 200 missing and murdered Indigenous women from across North America, and she has placed them on a giant white kuspuk. And a kuspuk is a traditional Yupik garment worn by Yupik women, but she's doing this to symbolize the adaptability and the strength of Native women. But this giant kuspuk, again, the faces across it, your eyes are drawn to the diversity. There's older women, there's younger women. In the center is the sketch, the face of Ashley Johnson Barr, who was a 10-year-old girl from Kotzebue who was kidnapped and killed. On the left sleeve of the kuspuk is a sketch of Sophie Sergey, who was killed in 1993. She was in the dorm at a University of Alaska Fairbanks dorm. Her case was cold for 25 years, and it's just been in this past year that the alleged killer has been brought forward. But I think we recognize that the faces on these kuspuk represent far, far, far too many lives lost. So I really appreciate working with Senator Cortez Masto on Savanna's Act when we reintroduced this last year. It was a real honor to work with our friend on this committee, Senator Heitkamp, who had first introduced it. But Savanna's Act and the Not Invisible Act, as you've pointed out, Mr. Chairman, really are trying to bring the issue of murdered and missing Indians to the attention of the nation. When you think about what happens when someone goes missing, just missing, unfortunately, we know that far too many vulnerable Native women may leave their village, go to visit a friend, come to the city. The statistics are shocking in terms of how quickly they are swept into a net that is devastating. Within 24 hours of being in town, they can be caught up in a trafficking operation without even knowing. And far too often then what happens is they go missing, they're trafficked, they're murdered. And so the loss that we have, the unspeakable loss that families feel, the invisibility that so many families have felt, the frustration that they're being let down by a system that just has not failed, that has failed them and has not protected them. So acknowledging not only the memory of Savanna LaFontaine Graywind, for whom Savanna's Act is named after, but there's so many who have been murdered, trafficked. What we've got to do, we've got to deal with the jurisdictional loopholes that criminals knowingly exploit. We have to improve the coordination among law enforcement at all levels. We have to provide the resources, and they have to be significant. So I appreciate working with so many of our colleagues on this. I do hope that we're able to advance this quickly through the Senate and be able to get it signed into law. Before I wrap up, Mr. Chairman, I want to also emphasize the importance, really the importance of passing a bipartisan VAWA bill with a strong tribal provision which empowers our tribal governments and respects tribal sovereignty. We all know the stories here. We know where the sexual predators go. They are preying on Native women in numbers that are just offensive because they know that they can commit offenses with impunity both in Indian country and in my state. I know we've got a Democrat version, we've got a Republican version out there. There is nothing partisan about making sure that Native women are protected. And my fear is that we're going to go down the same road that we went in 2013, where VAWA was the political football. And I would just urge, we are dealing with vulnerable women here. We are dealing with those who really feel that they have no voice. The last thing in the world they want to do is get caught up in our partisan politics. So I would just urge us all. I know we know what the right thing is to do. We'll figure this out, but in the meantime, I want to give some assurance that we are going to be doing right, not only with passing Savanna's Act, Not Invisible, dealing with murdered and missing, trafficked Indigenous women and all peoples, but we're also going to do right by VAWA. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look forward to rapid passage of these great bills.
Thank you, Senator Murkowski, and I certainly agree with you. In fact, I just spoke on the floor about the need to move forward on VAWA. So thank you very much. Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Chairman Hoeven and Vice Chairman Udall. Thank you for holding this business meeting today. Your leadership in addressing the crisis of missing, murdered, and trafficked Native American, Alaska Native women and children is so appreciated. And of course, I want to thank my colleague, Senator Murkowski, for her dedication to this issue, as you can hear, and her collaboration and all of the good work and the opportunity to work with her. She's such a great partner to be able to work with on this crisis. And you mentioned it earlier, Senator, though she is not in the room today, I do want to thank Senator Heitkamp for her leadership on this issue, and I am honored to work with my colleagues to continue what she started. So thank you. The two bills we are considering today are critical for improving the safety of Native American women and children in this country, as you've heard, Savanna's Act and Not Invisible Act. Since I joined the committee almost 3 years ago, we have heard so many personal stories about the impact that the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women is having on our tribal communities. There are 28 tribal communities in the state of Nevada. I've had several roundtable discussions with our tribes on these issues. Native women experience astronomical rates of violence. I know that from the work that I've done as senator, as well as Attorney General of the state of Nevada, working with our tribes. We have heard all of the statistics before, and we need to remember that behind every statistic are families who are hurting. It's time for us to show that we care and we want things to change. We will do that through our actions today. These two bills will make necessary improvements so that Native American, Alaska Native women and children can feel safer and get justice. So the amendments before us today are the results of thorough, careful, bipartisan work with the tribes, with advocacy organizations, with survivors, stakeholders, and the administration. I'm grateful for everyone who gave their time, effort, and expertise to help us get where we all are today, and I look forward to swift passage of these two pieces of important legislation. So thank you again to my colleagues, and let's move the bills.
Are there other comments on either of the bills? Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank my colleagues for moving and being dedicated to this bill. Obviously, had a chance to work in the last Congress with our colleague from North Dakota on this, and was very disappointed that even though we moved it out of the United States Senate, there was a roadblock in the House of Representatives. So hopefully, this roadblock won't exist anymore. But I just think today about who might have been saved if, in fact, we would have moved sooner on this. And that is why it's imperative that we move now. I have strong support for Savanna's Act. All over the country, these Native women and girls are missing, murdered, and assaulted at these unbelievable rates. And a released report by the Seattle Indian Health Board found that Washington, the state of Washington, has the highest number of cases of murdered and missing and Indigenous women. It also found that two of my state's largest cities, Seattle and Tacoma, are in the top 10 nationwide cities with the highest numbers of cases. In fact, Seattle ranks number 1. So I want to see this legislation passed. I want us to get it to the House of Representatives this year, and I want to see the House of Representatives take action on it this year. There's no reason that the House of Representatives didn't take action on it in the past Congress. So we know that what is missing here is the framework that Savanna's Act will give us. And while I also want to pass the Violence Against Women Act, I also don't want Savanna's Act held hostage to getting that legislation done. We need to give Indian country more specificity today in the framework with working with local law enforcement to get that done. And we will fight. I believe the Congress has missed the point by not having the Violence Against Women Act on the floor this year. There are lots to do in the United States Senate, and everything that's expiring, in my opinion, should have action on it, including that. But let's move Savanna's Act today. The Yakama Nation has decades-old unsolved cases of family members that have gone missing, been murdered, or had mysterious deaths that have not been solved. This, too, is unacceptable. This epidemic is unacceptable. And we can't ignore the families and friends who've been left without answers. So I am proud to have been a past supporter of this legislation. I want to make sure it gets through the hurdles of the Legislative Congress this year. Native American women, Native Alaska women deserve to have this in law this year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, then we will proceed.
Just
Senator Tester, I'm sorry.
First of all, I just want to, I can't thank Senator Murkowski and Senator Cortez Masto enough for your leadership on this bill, and Senator Heidkamp too. You guys have done marvelous bill on Savanna's Act and Not Invisible Act. I think there are a lot of issues that are impacting Native American people right now. I don't know that there's anything more important than this one right now. It's that important. And I couldn't agree with you more, Senator Murkowski, about a good VAWA Act with a strong Native American component. I think it's absolutely essential, and I think it's it's political malpractice not to take these bills to the floor and have them debated and amended in anywhere where the majorities want to go. A majority of people in the Senate I'm talking about, and getting these bills done. So I can't thank you enough, and we will put pressure wherever we can on our leadership. If you promise to do the same on yours, and maybe we can get them to the floor. And I think this is a very, very important issue, and I'm going to ask for a roll call vote on these two bills.
Thank you, Senator Tester. Then we'll proceed. Did I miss? Okay. All right. We'll now turn to the bill, starting with S-227, Savanna's Act. This bill has one amendment in the nature of a substitute to consider, amendment number SIL 19C03, offered by Senators Murkowski and Cortez Masto. Do I have a motion to consider amendment number SIL 19C03? So moved. Do I have a second? Is there further discussion? There being no further discussion, all those in favor, we're a roll call vote, so the clerk will call a roll.
On final.
Oh, on final, I'm sorry, okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? There being none, in the opinion of the chair, the amendment passes. Do I have a motion now to consider the bill S-227 as amended? So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? There being none, then we will have a roll call vote.
Might not have. There's a reason.
Chairman Hovind.
Aye.
Barazio.
It's
and-
Barrasso.
Oh, Barrasso.
Mr. Brasso.
We
will
have
let-
the
Aye
proxy.
by proxy.
Aye by proxy. Makowski.
Aye.
Langford, aye by proxy. Mr. Senator Daines, aye by proxy. McSally,
Aye by proxy.
aye by proxy. Senator Moran,
Not present.
not present. Senator Udall.
Aye.
Senator Cantwell. Senator Tester.
Aye.
Senator Cortez Masto. And Senator Smith.
And Senator Shaw.
And Senator Schatz,
Aye.
aye by proxy. Thank you.
Ayes have it. In the bill S-227 as amended is passed. We will now turn to S-982, the Not Invisible Act of 2019. This bill has one amendment in the nature of a substitute to consider. Amendment number SIL 19C04, offered by Senators Cortez Masto and Murkowski. Do I have a motion to consider amendment number SIL 19C04? So moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? There being none, in the opinion of the chair, the amendment passes. Do I have a motion to consider the bill S-982 as amended? Do I have a second?
Second.
Was there a request for roll call vote on this bill as well?
I'd like it. I think it's important.
Okay. Then we'll have a roll call on the
Senator,
bill.
Chairman Hovind.
Aye.
Senator Barrasso,
Aye by proxy.
aye by proxy. Senator Makowski.
Aye.
Senator Langford, aye by proxy. Senator Daines, aye by proxy. Senator McSally, aye by proxy.
Yep.
Senator Moran,
Not present.
not present. Senator Udall.
Aye.
Senator Cantwell.
Aye.
Senator Tester.
Aye.
Senator Schatz, aye by proxy. Senator Cortez Masto.
Aye.
Senator Smith.
So 12 ayes. not present, ayes have it.
12 ayes, 1 not present, ayes have it.
The bill is passed as amended. S982 is passed as amended. I want to thank the members for completing our business. Also, I want to acknowledge Senator Heidkamp as well on Savanna's Act, as did other members. I ask for unanimous consent that staff be allowed to make technical and conforming changes, and there being no further objection or other business, we are adjourned.